Hey there folks, John Oliver here, ready to tackle a topic that might sound as exciting as watching paint dry promissory notes. Don't switch channels just yet. These little pieces of paper, or digital documents if you're feeling fancy, are actually pretty interesting, especially if you're in South Africa, and let's be honest, who isn't these days? So, what's the deal with promissory notes? In simple terms, they're like legally binding IOUs. You're basically saying, hey bank, I promise to pay you this much money by this date. And guess what? In South Africa, they're totally legal and recognized by courts. That's right, folks. You can use these bad boys to settle debts with banks. But before you go printing your own money, which by the way is very illegal and will land you in a world of trouble, there are some things you need to know. Stick around and we'll break it all down for you. Think of it like this. You wouldn't try to bake a cake without a recipe, right? Same goes for promissory notes. You need the right ingredients and instructions to make sure they hold up. Don't worry, we've got you covered. Now let's dive into some legal mumbo-jumbo, but don't worry, we'll keep it brief. South Africa's High Court rules, specifically Rule 45(8), deals with something called incorporeal property. Sounds fancy, right? It basically means things you can't physically touch but still have value, like debts or intellectual property. And guess what falls under that category? You guessed it, promissory notes. This rule is important because it recognizes these notes as legit legal documents that can be used for payment, just like cold hard cash or, a bank transfer. Think of it like this. If you owe someone 10 Rand and you have a legally valid IOU for 10 Rand, they have to accept it. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that, but you get the gist. The takeaway here is that South African law acknowledges the power of a well-written promissory note. It's not just some random piece of paper you scribbled on. It's a legally binding document that can hold its own in court. Let's talk about a real-life example, shall we? Back in the day, a South African chap named Michael Tellinger had a bit of a disagreement with STD Bank. And who hasn't, am I right? Long story short, Tellinger used a promissory note to try and settle a debt with the bank. Now here's where it gets interesting. The court actually recognized the promissory note as a valid form of payment. That's right, folks. The court said, yep, this note holds water. Of course, there were other factors involved in the case, and it wasn't as simple as that. But the point is, this case showed that promissory notes aren't just some fringe legal loophole. They can be used effectively in certain situations, especially when dealing with banks. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight and realizing, hey, this knife can actually hold its own. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how do I whip up one of these magical promissory notes? Well, hold your horses, because it's not as simple as scribbling I owe you $1 million on a napkin. There's a specific format and some key ingredients you need to include. First things first, you need to clearly state that it's a promissory note at the top, just in case the bank manager missed it. Then you need to include the amount you're promising to pay, the date by which you'll pay it, and who you're paying it to. Don't forget to sign your name, because your signature is like your legal autograph. Think of it like baking a cake. You need the right amount of flour, sugar, and eggs to make it rise. Similarly, a promissory note needs the right legal elements to be valid and enforceable. Section 5, Legalities and Limitations, Banks Only. Now, before you go using your newfound promissory note powers to buy a private island, let's be clear, this strategy is for dealing with banks only. Don't try to pay your rent, your taxes, or your local pizza guy with a promissory note. They'll probably laugh you out of the building, or worse, call the authorities. Why banks, you ask? Well, banks are special creatures in the financial world. They're governed by specific laws and regulations, and promissory notes fall under their purview. It's like trying to use a coupon at a different store. It just won't fly. The bottom line is, while promissory notes can be a handy tool in your financial arsenal, they're not a magic bullet. Use them wisely and only for their intended purpose, dealing with those lovely folks at the bank. Section 6, the One People's Public Trust. A potential underwriter. Now let's talk about a group that's been making waves in South Africa, the One People's Public Trust, or OPPT. They claim to be all about, well, the people. And they've even suggested that they could potentially underwrite personal promissory notes. What does underwriting mean? It's basically like co-signing a loan. The underwriter, in this case potentially OPPT, is saying, hey, we trust this person to pay up. This could be a game changer because it adds another layer of legitimacy to your promissory note. However, it's important to note that OPPT's involvement in this area is still developing. It's like a new restaurant that just opened. The jury's still out on whether the food is any good. So, while it's an intriguing possibility, proceed with caution and do your research before jumping on board. Section 7. Research is key. Know your rights and responsibilities. Here's the thing, folks. The world of finance and law can be a murky, confusing place. It's easy to get lost in the jargon and technicalities. That's why it's crucial to do your own research and understand your rights and responsibilities before you even think about creating a promissory note. Don't just take our word for it, although we are incredibly trustworthy if we do say so ourselves. Consult with legal professionals. Do your due diligence and make sure you fully grasp the ins and outs of promissory notes before you start whipping them out like confetti. Think of it like this. You wouldn't perform surgery on yourself after watching a YouTube tutorial, right? Well, hopefully not. The same goes for legal and financial matters. Get expert advice and don't rely solely on internet wisdom. Section 8. Safeguarding your notes. Tips for protection. All right, so you've done your research, crafted your promissory note, and sent it off to the bank. Mission accomplished, right? Not so fast. It's important to keep a record of your note just in case something fishy happens. Make copies, scan it, email it to yourself. Basically, treat it like a winning lottery ticket, although hopefully it won't result in you getting kidnapped. You want to be able to prove that you created the note and that it's legitimate. Think of it like this. You wouldn't leave your house unlocked with a giant neon sign saying, "Rob me." Similarly, you need to protect your financial documents from potential fraud or disputes. There's Section 9, Understanding Your Rights. You're your own advocate. Here's a hard truth. Sometimes things go wrong. Banks can be tricky, and legal battles can be a nightmare. That's why it's crucial to understand your rights and be prepared to stand up for yourself. If you believe a bank is treating you unfairly or not honoring a valid promissory note, don't be afraid to push back. Consult with a legal professional and explore your options. Remember, knowledge is power, and knowing your rights is the first step to protecting yourself. Think of it like this. If you order a burger and it comes out burnt, you'd send it back, right? The same goes for financial transactions. Don't be afraid to speak up if you believe something is amiss. Section 10, the importance of local laws, South Africa's context. Now, a quick reminder, we've been focusing on South Africa because, well, it's a fascinating place with its own set of laws and regulations. What works in South Africa might not fly in other countries. So, if you're not in South Africa, don't assume that everything we've discussed applies to you. Do your homework, research your local laws, and consult with legal professionals in your jurisdiction. Think of it like this. You wouldn't use a map of Paris to navigate London, right? Unless you enjoy getting hopelessly lost, which, hey, no judgment here. Similarly, you need to use the right legal map for your specific location. Section 11, conclusion, proceed with caution and knowledge. So there you have it, folks. A crash course on promissory notes in South Africa. Remember, these financial instruments can be powerful tools, but only if used correctly and legally. Do your research, understand your rights, and proceed with caution. And hey, if you ever find yourself in a legal battle with a bank, just remember, John Oliver and his team of legal eagles are always here to provide moral support, and maybe a funny meme or two. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay hilarious. Because let's face it, the world of finance is a lot more bearable with a little bit of laughter.